Hi, I'm John Sample, and I will be covering the IDEA and Special Education Law module. You can see some information about me on this slide. Additional information so that you can familiarize yourself as to where I'm coming from. During my undergrad years at Northern Arizona University, my original major was Phy Ed with an industrial arts or tech ed minor. In fact, Phy Ed people will appreciate this. I actually took my anatomy and physiology class as well as kinesiology, and it wasn't until I took an elective course called Adaptive Phy Ed that I really realized that I fell in love with students with disabilities and the struggles and the challenges that they have, and it really opened my eyes to the area of special education. So that's where my passion began. I transferred to ASU, received my bachelor's degree there, and then later my master's degree there, and then I earned my doctorate at Edgewood College in Madison, Wisconsin. I've always felt that we need to challenge our students with disabilities in order for them to be successful, rather than establish low expectations designed for them to never be successful or get caught up or understand their strengths. It's also our responsibility to advocate for our students with disabilities as well as their parents. Most of my teaching experience has all been cross-categorical or multiple disability areas. I began teaching in suburban Phoenix. I had kindergarten through fifth grade on a pull-out or a resource basis. And then I felt kind of the call of the wild. I was single then, and I went to Alaska, and I taught 3 years. I taught all disabilities, ranging from ages 3 through high school in a small Eskimo village in Koyuk, Alaska. Koyuk is on the Iditarod Trail. It's 5 villages from the finish line in Nome. During a Christmas vacation, during my 3rd year, I was back in Phoenix visiting. Fell in love with a very special person who I went on to marry. That's my wife. And so I returned to Arizona, and I taught 3rd through 5th grade inner city Phoenix, which was a whole new challenge, but one that I truly loved, and I met some wonderful students and teachers there. I then had an opportunity to open a brand new high school in a very prominent area of northwest Glendale, Arizona. And so I worked there all along. I've been coaching track and football. I coached wrestling when in Alaska because they didn't have track or football. But I also felt the need after several years, quite a few years, to return to my roots. And so I went back to my alma mater, where many of my former teachers and coaches were still working. We moved to Wisconsin about 18 years ago. We wanted a sense of community. We liked the 4 seasons. Phoenix just got too big, and there was too much crime, and I saw Phoenix change from what used to be neighborly to people just not knowing each other. And so about the time our daughter was turning school age is when we relocated to central Wisconsin. And so that's what brings us here. My wife is an elementary art teacher. She's been teaching now for 28 years. This is my 32nd year in education. And one interesting fact, and this is not because I was anything special as far as being a coach, it's just happenstance. 3 former players of mine are currently playing in the NFL, and I coached all of these young men as freshmen. And you want to talk about some contrast. One of those gentlemen is Richie Incognito. He plays offensive guard for the Raiders. He's had his share of issues, that's for sure, but I always pull for him and hope that he can straighten things out. On the flip side of things, a wonderful young man, Prince Amukamara, formerly of the Bears, he is now with the Raiders as well. And so I'm able to catch up with him and go to a few games, and just a fantastic person. And then I also coached Jonathan Weeks. He is a long snapper for the Houston Texans. So kind of unusual that 3 of my former freshman athletes all ended up in the NFL. I hope you enjoy this module. If you have any questions at all, wait for the final slide, and there will be information where we can get your questions answered. Thank you. The Individual with Disabilities Education Act is the nation's special education law. It is the cornerstone for ensuring the special education process and providing rights to students with disabilities. Prior to the reauthorization of IDEA, the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act was enacted in 1975. The field of special education has its own terms. Click on the links to familiarize yourself with the plethora of terms used in the area of special education. On a cautionary note, please avoid using acronyms, abbreviations, and unexplained terms when addressing those outside the field. As an administrator, also encourage others to speak in plain, easy-to-understand language, especially at IEP meetings. The use of acronyms can be confusing and intimidating to parents, and they are key members of the IEP team. This slide shows the 13 disability categories as outlined by the reauthorization of IDEA. This slide, as well as the one that follows, provides the basic information associated with a student's individual education plan, or IEP. Please click on the link for information related to IEPs and IEP meetings. The LEA, or Local Education Agency, has an important role in IEP meetings. The LEA ensures provision or supervision of specifically designed instruction, is knowledgeable about general education curriculum, and maintains the availability of resources or funding provided by the district to meet the needs of the student. It is also important to note that the LEA has the authority to stop a meeting and reconvene later should the meeting come to an impasse or become heated. The LEA is typically a building administrator, but may also be a non-administrator, such as a counselor or school psychologist not associated with the student. Please carefully read and understand the definition of least restrictive environment, as its meaning is often misconstrued when considering the educational placement of a student. This slide shows the continuum of placement available when considering the least restrictive environment for a student. The ultimate goal is placement in the general education classroom with no supports. Read down the list for the continuum of placements available depending on the severity of the student's disability and/or performance. A professional pet peeve of mine is hearing a district proclaim themselves as an inclusion district. This insinuates that no student with disabilities requires a separate or a pull-out environment as their least restrictive environment. Remember, the least restrictive environment is that place where students can be most successful. Disruptions will occur. They happen in environments with students without a documented disability. For students with disabilities, please consider the supports necessary in any placement where disruptions may be expected. While it is required to place the student in the least restrictive environment to ensure their success, it is also important to identify these supports as to minimize the disruptive learning of others. Students with disabilities with an IEP are subject to disciplinary action, as are all students, but are under separate circumstances. Students with disabilities may be removed from their current placement on an interim basis, another setting altogether, and may be suspended for no more than 10 days. The 10-day rule applies to the entire duration of the school year. Once the student is approaching the 10-day mark, an IEP team meeting must be held to determine if the current placement is appropriate. A student with a disability may also be removed to an interim alternative educational setting, not to exceed 45 days, under the following two conditions identified on this slide. A manifestation determination must happen if the student's placement is considered due to disciplinary reasons. This slide contains important information for what is determined at this meeting and the factors that must be considered. Most of the time, the school psychologist will take the lead in all manifestation determination meetings. Please click on the link for more information. 504 plans began as a plan to safeguard discrimination against students found to not be eligible for special education. While students may not qualify for services based on a documented disability, they may be eligible for supports through a Section 504 plan. There are many court cases referencing special education and the legal matters that have happened. Knowing how past court rulings have shaped the practices, procedures, and requirements in special education is important for all school personnel involved. Let's see how familiar you are currently regarding special education case law. Please click on the link to start your brief quiz. How did you do? It's okay if you didn't score 100%, as there is much to learn about special education and case law. Please read the following case, and you be the judge. What is your decision, and who was awarded in this case? The court declared the IEP a nullity. The district had to convene an IEP team and start anew. Never permit unilateral deviation from an IEP. IEPs may only be modified by the team at a meeting or if the parents and the district have agreed in writing that the team may, in lieu of convening a meeting, develop a written document to amend or modify a child's current IEP. While school districts certainly partner with attorneys when it becomes legally necessary, having a good understanding of special education law will behoove you as an administrator. As a building principal, the special education director will be a very valuable resource. If you are a special ed director, the personnel will look to you for guidance and decisions. The more familiar you are with the reauthorization of IDEA and the current special education requirements, the more effective you will be in supporting our students with disabilities to be successful. After all students deserve the opportunity for success and the chance to pursue their dreams after graduation.